60 Minutes Rewind.
By now, you may know a family shattered by the opioid epidemic. In 2017, there were 47,000 opioid deaths. That's more Americans than were killed in vehicle accidents or by firearms. One drug, fentanyl, is like rocket fuel in the sharp rise of this crisis. Fentanyl is a painkiller invented in the 1960s and used to relieve the agony of advanced cancer. It is 50 times more potent than heroin. But today, fentanyl can be ordered on the internet by drug dealers and addicts for an online overdose. Tracking the source of this illicit trade is a story that begins with James Rao. Like most in Akron, Ohio, he'd never heard of fentanyl until the police told him his son was dead.
They told me that the drug was so powerful that he was unable to finish his injection, and then he died immediately.
He didn't even finish the injection?
He'd only just started the injection. He didn't even have a chance.
James Rao's son, Tom, was 37 when he died in 2015. He'd started opioids years before after an injury. When his prescription ran out, he turned to heroin. He'd been in and out of rehab more than half a dozen times when fentanyl inundated Ohio.
There was something extremely dangerous going on because Tom was a veteran addict. You know, he knew how to dose himself. He knew how much he could handle. I was wondering how in the world this would get here and who would be selling it.
1 week after Tom Rao's death, the mother of 23-year-old Carrie Dobbins grabbed her phone.
Akron 911, what is the location of your mother?
My daughter is dead. I just got home from work a little bit ago and I went down in the basement. She's dead.
Please stay on the line with me, ma'am. You need to be very specific.
I think she did drugs.
2 deaths in Akron in 7 days made Assistant U.S. Attorney Matt Cronin wonder where all the fentanyl was coming from. The target of an investigation, a low-level drug dealer, had the answer.
The target said that he can get any drugs he could ever imagine over the internet from China.
Cronin's investigators went online and discovered overseas labs offering most any illegal drug.
And we just said, hey, according to the source's instructions, we're interested in buying fentanyl. And the result was, to say the least, surprising. We have dozens, probably over 50 different drug trafficking networks reaching out to us saying, we have fentanyl. We have even more powerful fentanyl analogs. Whatever you want. We'll get it for you cheap. We'll get it for you in bulk.
You got 50 replies.
At least.
And all of these came from where?
It was universally China.
What did you do next?
Instead of trying to find our way to a target, we had far too many. So what we decided to do was go through the list and see any that popped out. And one name in particular struck out of the list.
What was that name?
Gordon Ginn.
When Gordon Ginn was making claims about what he could provide, what did he tell your undercover agents?
What Gordon Ginn said he could provide you was essentially any drug you could imagine. Those that exist, those that don't even currently exist. He called it custom synthesis. What it really meant was made to order poison.
We'll track down the man prosecutors say is Gordon Ginn in a moment, but first have a look at fentanyl and its derivatives. Justin Herdman is U.S. Attorney in Cleveland. He told us some of this was seized by the DEA. The rest was found in the mail by U.S. Postal Service inspectors.
This is essentially enough fentanyl and carfentanil to kill every man, woman, and child in the city of Cleveland.
Just this?
Just this.
Carfentanil is a derivative used by veterinarians to tranquilize elephants.
Carfentanil is another 100 times more potent than fentanyl. Here you've got 300 grams of powder that could deliver a fatal dose to 150,000 people. Here you've got only 5 grams of powder, which could deliver a fatal dose to over 250,000 people.
If you touch this stuff, it could kill you.
Yeah.
Just touch it.
There's a reason we have a medic standing by, Scott. And that's because an overdose is, unfortunately, it's something that we have to be prepared for, even dealing with it in an evidence bag.
Herdman showed us pills that look like prescription opioids, but are dangerous counterfeits.
Whether it's cocaine, or you think it's heroin, or you think it's pills, it's going to have fentanyl in it.
Why?
It's cheaper to buy fentanyl, and because it's so potent, you can cut it in a way that you can deliver far more doses with a little bit of fentanyl. So it's a profit motive for them.
Where did all this stuff come from?
It's from China. It's manufactured in China. These are all related to cases that involve the mail or the use of the postal system. So somebody put this into a box, sealed it up, and sent it through the postal system.
The United States postal system has been, for many years, the most reliable way to smuggle drugs from China to the U.S.
That has to stop. It should have stopped years ago.
Ohio Senator Rob Portman's staff investigated the traffic.
What did your office's investigation find?
Shocking, what we found, which was that people who were trafficking in fentanyl told us, if you send it through the post office, we guarantee delivery. If you send it through a private carrier, not so.
That's because after 9/11, all private carriers like FedEx were required to give U.S. Customs advanced descriptions and tracking of foreign packages. The Postal Service was allowed to delay because of the cost.
They gave the post office some time and said, you need to give us a report as to how you can also comply with this. That was 16 years ago, Scott.
It's primarily produced in laboratories in China, and it's primarily coming to the United States through the United States mail system.
Portman sponsored a bill to force the post office to send advance notice of shipments from China, and last fall, the bill became law.
We now have this legislation in place. They need to implement it quickly. They need to do everything possible to screen these packages coming in.
But the Postal Service was supposed to do that by the end of last year. It says China is not cooperating. About a third of the packages from China shipped by the U.S. Postal Service still do not have advanced content information.
The Gordon Gin drug trafficking organization, in their own communications and advertisements online, stated they ship to 5 continents in all 50 states. They advertised, and it seemed accurate. They had special ways to bypass customs in the U.S., the UK, the EU, and Russia.
Assistant U.S. Attorney Matt Cronin told us that Gordon Gin would often slip fentanyl past U.S. Customs by shipping it to a co-conspirator in the United States, posing as a legitimate chemical company. Shipments between chemical companies weren't considered suspicious. A large crate would arrive at the U.S. company, but inside there would be as many as 50 individual drug packages, each addressed to the person who'd ordered them.
The story will continue after this.
So they take out these 50 different parcels and send it across the United States and, as I mentioned, even the world.
They were going out to the door of the individual people that ordered them online.
That's right. We realized that we found Gordon Gin's drug trafficking route, essentially his camouflage to get the drugs into the United States.
According to prosecutors, Gordon Gin is an alias for a father and son drug lab in China. Matt Cronin briefed Chinese authorities on the evidence, but the Chinese failed to act. Later, a grand jury in the United States indicted the father and son, and they're now wanted in the U.S. But they enjoy freedom in China. 60 Minutes producer Bob Anderson found Guanghua Zheng, the father, outside a Shanghai grocery store.
This is you and your son. This is put out in the U.S. to arrest you in the U.S.
When Anderson asked Zheng if he was still selling fentanyl in the U.S., Zheng answered with an emphatic no, no. The woman with him did not like our questions. She tells him, don't speak, don't speak. She tells us, don't come back.
Will the Chinese government ever arrest you? Will the Chinese government ever arrest you?
He said the Chinese government has nothing to do with it.
What do you say to parents? What do you say to parents whose children died from taking your drugs?
Zheng had no answer for that, but he had had enough of 60 Minutes. Prosecutors say that the fentanyl that killed Carrie Dobbins and Tom Rao came from the Gordon Gin lab in China and arrived in Akron via the U.S. Postal Service.
The thing that got me the most, though, was how brazen they were. They wrote a blog and posted it on a website about how they create a certain type of synthetic narcotic. And they stated in that blog that it's tied to overdoses. In other words, that it's so potent it can kill you.
Why would they want to associate themselves with people who died using these drugs?
The unfortunate truth is that when you have an addict, sometimes they're seeking the greatest high possible, and that can be the high that comes closest to death.
And so they were bragging.
Absolutely.
That their drugs were so potent that people had overdosed and died.
They were the best out there. That's right.
Their boast was tragically true for the son of James Rao.
It destroys families, because what happens to a family is the person gets sick and you're trying to help them and you're trying to do everything that you can, and then you lose them. And so you suffer up to that point, and then you suffer when they die, and then you suffer afterwards because you could have stopped it. You feel that every single day. You think, what could I have done to stop this from happening to my family? I was in charge, I didn't do this right, and it's breaking my heart.
The U.S. has sealed off the overseas bank accounts of Guanhua Jing and his son. The feds also shut down what prosecutors say were the Jing's 40 websites selling illegal drugs in 20 languages. We don't know if their lab shut down, but the network has been, at least for now.
It is a fact that the People's Republic of China is the source for the vast majority of synthetic opioids that are flooding the streets of the United States and Western democracies. It is a fact that these synthetic opioids are responsible for the overwhelming increase in overdose deaths in the United States. And it is a fact that if the People's Republic of China wanted to shut down the synthetic opioid industry, they could do so in a day.
China has been criticized by the U.S. government for failing to put the many forms of fentanyl on its list of controlled drugs. Now, in a concession, China says next month all derivatives of fentanyl will be on its list. But U.S. law enforcement remains skeptical about whether China will crack down.